Brian Hopkins, friend, wellbeing consultant, all-round legend. Welcome to Thinking Class. I've been really looking forward to our conversation, at least a conversation that's recorded.
Yeah, it's an honor. I remember talking about the idea of this before it came a reality. So it's a joy to see it come to fruition. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Well, we've worked together in the past and we've spent time on walks around the block in London, having chats about philosophy, having stoic chats over breakfast, usually some kind of mushroom and fried egg on toast number, if I remember rightly. And I'm delighted to welcome you on the show because I know this is going to be enjoyable. I know it's going to be deep because it generally is when you and I speak, but I think that's also your shtick. And I think that's why a lot of people kind of pulled into your tractor beam, as it were, because you say things real and you say things that people ordinarily wouldn't say in the corporate world. So I think that bodes well for today. So look, we know you're a wellbeing consultant, but you've taken a really interesting path there. Tell us about that.
How deep are we going?
Well, I mean, I would be remiss to say, don't give me the man and boy speech, because that's basically all I ever do.
Yeah. So a long time ago, there were no wellbeing consultant gigs, speaking gigs or TED Talks on the horizon for young Ryan. I grew up in Hastings in East Sussex, and I was trained to be an electrician when I was 18. And it was because I didn't have any qualifications for one reason or another. Family split when I was young, and it was me, my mum and my brothers, essentially. So I worked from a young age to help support my mum, and used to have to come home from school and cook for my little brothers while mum was out working late, trying to make ends work. And as a result of that and other reasons, didn't come out with any qualifications from school. Not any of them, no. Anyway, went to college again. Not that interested, was working full time while I was there. So it was a recipe to not get much out of it, really. So I trained to be a sparky because that's what you do. You're from a smaller town. You're from up to the north, so you know lots of sparkies.
Well, I'm not from Yorkshire, Ryan, but it's a little bit further south.
All the same to me. Anything north is north of me.
Yeah. Anything north of the M25. It's just like anything south of Yorkshire for us. You're a Cockney.
Not right. And it's trained to be a spark. Loved it. Really enjoyed what I did. And used to play rugby every weekend, and played one day and broke my leg and my ankle quite severely. And it was one of those ones where it facing the wrong way, and took a very long time to be able to walk again. I lost my job, my funding. I had no prospects, no future. I put on lots of weight. I lost my sense of identity. Just put on quite a strong antidepressant. That and where I was, I ended up seeing things, and then I was at a point where I could see myself hanging, and made plans to take my own life when I was 19, 20. I didn't because love from my mum and the people I had around me. If it wasn't for the thought of letting her down, I wouldn't be here now. And I got a job in a bank on the counter, like in Halifax, and I used to be a pretty good salesman. I'd be, all right, how's it going? Push to the gab. And then I was pretty good. I was one of the best in the country. I developed some quite unhealthy coping mechanisms to lose the weight. I developed bulimia, but I couldn't tell anyone because I'm a working class rugby player man. And I hadn't even seen or heard from any women that were going through it, let alone any men, let alone any working class men. And a former tradesman, it's not something you talk about when you have a cup of tea, sit on the edge of a brick wall in the garden as you're doing a conservatory. And finally told my mum, ended up getting some support, went one way, met someone, traveled one way to Argentina, and traveled around for about a year, and taught myself Spanish, and set up a hostel business in Ecuador, which is amazing. I thought, I can do more than where life was taking me with no qualifications. So I said at 24, 25, I want to get to university. Went to like the only uni that would have me in the UK because I had no qualifications, and worked my arse off. and transferred to Oxford Brookes, where I worked as a bouncer part-time while I was at uni. I was playing rugby again, and I'd gone the other way. I was unhappy lean when I was bulimic, and I thought, I'm going to go the other way. If I'm not happy lean, I'm going to be happy ginormous. So I tried to become the largest man on legs you've ever seen. Like a micro Eddie Hall. Just a bald version of him. I was about 110 kilos and I was pulling double-decker buses and squatting quarter ton and just still deeply miserable with who I was. And I couldn't, well, every time I left my front door, I felt like I was going to work myself. And I'd get out of cars, I couldn't go in trains, I couldn't sit in the lecture halls, I just ended up staying home for the best part of a year and a bit. Finally finished my degree and I got a job at Deloitte, big green dot. And I started as the world's oldest consultant. And I took some digital transformation, understanding the future for organizations and the direction of travel. And then I started to share my story like one piece at a time at these events as the odds awareness event was on, because that's all we had a few years ago. And I found that there were a lot more people like me than I once thought. And I continued to share pieces and eventually said, I want to help people not end up where I did. If they do, to know they're not alone, and started doing that work internally. But it was too early to do it as a career. I left to go and lead Wellbeing at Sainsbury's Tech and loved that. Did some really cool things. Was made redundant, went to a big tech company where I was the future of work lead, using like the digital stuff. Rolled out some amazing things, did like hybrid, like a flexible approach to hybrid, unlimited paid vacation, a rights disconnect policy, ended up teaching Microsoft how to use their own tools, which is pretty cool. All without saying the word well-being, because I think it's an outcome. I think we try and solutionize everything where we actually need the space, time to work out what we need as individuals. You can take the horse to well-being water, but you can't make it drink. And then I got made redundant again, and I was thinking, I picked the wrong career here. Should have gone back to being a spark. And then got the opportunity to come back to Deloitte to set up and create the well-being business that I wanted to do years before. And I think this is where it all just clicked together. The experience, the passion, the purpose. It was like I found my ethic guy, and things really started really booting off at this point. Created that business, took that around the world, positively influenced the lives of 500,000 people. I've reached about 10 million on socials now, and then got an amazing opportunity to be the Chief Impact Officer at the coolest mental health platform I've ever seen. And we're going to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people. So yeah, that's the direction of travel. That's why we got to where I get to. That's why I care so much, because I just don't want people to end up where I did. And if they do, to know they're not a freak like I felt for probably 15 years of my life.
Well, I knew that was going to be a heartfelt response, Ryan. And I think that explains why you're on the trajectory that you're on, because you're not driven by metrics, solutions, or status. That's not what I see anyway. And there's always a deep philosophical undertone to the way that you speak, the way that you write. If anyone follows you on LinkedIn, what has the impact of philosophy been on your life?
I knew that was coming. I was thinking about, I've had a busy day today, but that question kept percolating as I knew this conversation was coming later. And I haven't shared anything. I hadn't shared this with anyone before. But when I was going the worst of my anxiety, let me just shut my slackers. I've clearly got that in the background. What an absolute donut. How not to do a podcast. So I will end up wearing a adult diaper because I was so nervous about going out with the thought I was going to wet myself with my anxiety that had never happened. It was just how it was manifesting. And I was so nervous to the point I was like breaking out in like hives and stress rashes and stuff. And it's amazing what this can do to your body. Everything is led up here, and it's often not the way we want it, right? And we went to Poland, to Krakow with a couple of my friends, and we went to Auschwitz, and I was wearing this adult nappy and just mortified. You can imagine how that makes you feel. Just nothing like the people that went to Auschwitz, right? But I felt pretty inhuman myself at times. I'm not comparing at all. But when I was going around, I felt the deep sense of sadness in that place. And I felt in quite a sad place at the same time and couldn't see a way out. And my friends in the gift shop bought me Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning, in the Auschwitz gift shop. He said this book meant a lot to me. He didn't know what I was going through because I never told anyone. And I read it, and honestly, like, it was like a light bulb moment. And this was 2014, 2015. And this is when I was like, I can do something about my situation. He who has a why can deal with anyhow. I want to start focusing on what I can do. And it's not the circle, everything that's going on around me and the way my brain is working, my anxiety and depression. I can accept it, or I can see the light in it. You can almost make the positive out of a negative situation. I learned from someone who's lived in the worst place imaginable, I think, in human history. And for him to have the mindset that your external circumstances don't define how you feel internally, and that there's like the dichotomy of control. You've got the controllables and the uncontrollables. I was just like, honestly, like, it just opened my eyes. And from that moment on, I started on my development journey, and I listened to everything in the back catalogue of Tim Ferriss, of on the podcast. And I was like, there is something that we can do. We don't have to accept our lot. Obviously your nature and your nurture. And I was thinking at that point, I really started to focus on what I could change, given my makeup, my brain chemistry, everything else, my history. I can't change that now, but what I can do is change what I do moving forwards. And it all stemmed from that moment.
It's so interesting you say that, because before this conversation, I thought I'd start pulling out some quotes which I thought neatly encapsulate how it is that you move through the world. And I'm a big fan of Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher. And a quote that I stumbled across through the notes in the back of his Enchiridion that I'd made was this: caretake this moment, immerse yourself in its particulars, respond to this person, this challenge, this deed, quit evasions, stop giving yourself needless trouble. It is time to really live, to fully inhabit the situation you happen to be in now. And that's what I always see you doing, Ryan, is you, and we'll get onto this touch later, I'm sure, with how you manage your day and your attention. But I see someone who is laser focused on the things that you can control, the things that you want to be able to control at least, and the things that you want to influence. And you orient your days around that, and you seem to have this ability to swat away those things which are going to do nothing but be an obstacle if you spend too much time on them. And I mean, that's just such a huge turnaround when you marry that to the story that we've heard at the beginning, which is how you even got here, which is, being unable to leave the house and being in a state of worry, anxiety, and all of those attendant feelings. That is such an unbelievable transformation. And I think that book being parachuted into your life, it's amazing what ideas can do to you as a person and the trajectory you're on. And I know philosophy for me, that became a gateway into reality. For many years, I had not really had any education similar to you, just been bumbling through things since after I'd left school, and was, trying to work hard and climb the greasy pole, but without any real guardrails or any foundation, or guardrails to grab onto and foundation to build on. And there's something about philosophy that allowed me to throw off the things that didn't work for me, and thus weren't working for others in my life as well. Helped me to form habit, because good habits that would help develop character and resilience, and to help focus in on the things that matter and disregard the things that don't. And I think it was one of the first times that I realized that you don't have to try and self-create and create your own meaning through life. There's literally a whole portal towards all recorded human wisdom sitting right there in the philosophical and spiritual traditions. You can stand on the shoulders of giants if you want. I mean, there's plenty of folly in there too, and you got to be careful It helps you discern and create a discerning mind where you're cutting the wheat from the chaff. But it is remarkable what an entrance into tradition or a school of thought or even just people's experiences can do to turn your own ship around.
And since that book, I think I've read about 250. I'm not reading as much as I would like. And I really went down the Stoic rabbit hole. And I was like, this is the philosophy for me. But I think I probably went a bit too much in it. Like you say, you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole. And I think I'm more of an emotional Stoic. I think there's something to be said for enjoying life's pleasures and for trying to maximize utility at times, because it can be difficult. I think there's opportunity to enjoy something. You don't need to question the enjoyment or treat yourself like an aesthetic, right? And take all of life's godly pleasures away from yourself. And I think I've kind of come back from that a little bit, but I like most of the tenets. I think you kind of select your own philosophy given what you've been through and where you want to get to. And I do like the determination. I do like the inner drive. I like the dichotomy of control. I like most of it, but I think there's a lot more in between that they miss in that time. And I think we live in a very different world now. And we're exposed to so much more stimulus, and to be so rational all the time is almost impossible. So you like control your periods of emotionality and you get back to work, because it's the intrinsic drivers and the things that motivate me to help others to engage and to keep on this journey that keep me going, rather than the extrinsic. And that has been hugely beneficial as well.
I agree. I also, in my entrance into philosophy, became a bit of a stoic addict. And I don't know what happened, but you seem to develop over time where you realize that there's a whole bunch of other things that make up human experience, and that mindset that you've just described is clearly a very important tool. And I know a bunch of therapies are based upon it. I know CBT is, for example.
Yeah,
I always find it quite interesting on stoicism.
That can like remove yourself from the situation, the stimulus. You don't have to respond. You choose everything. You can see where it all comes from, right? And it's age-old wisdom for a reason. It's had a renaissance in the past 10 years of Ryan Holiday. But it does inform a lot of how we deal with issues.
Yeah, totally. You've got a LinkedIn following that's pretty huge now. You consistently generate engagement, got a loyal band of fans, it seems. And you write really convincingly about stats on well-being being consistently low. So anytime anyone tracks self-reported well-being at work, never seems to come out too favorably. What do you think the reasons are for the lack of well-being at work?
So interestingly, I do report on a lot of data, but there's a lack of data. So I think I use what's available, but there's almost next to no studies on the use of any of these tools and benefits and solutions and perks and boxes and bikes and bananas and events and none of that. It's all, the vast majority is trying to plaster over like symptoms of broader problems. And it's nice and they're shiny and they last for a minute and that's great. And then you get slammed back into a 14-hour day and nothing changes. So the measurement is essentially non-existent. 1-2% of companies in the UK are doing proper measurement using attrition, absenteeism, stuff like that. So until that changes, it's going to be a fringe benefit. Has to be integrated into business decisions. The Labour government, if they get in, or the future Labour government, have said that they would, well-being of the population would be the number one criterion for any public policy decision made. We will see if that happens. I'd love to know how they measure that as well. But I think it shows a step change. I think we're moving in the right direction. So I think most of the tools don't work. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the time you have to go through some form of, I don't want to say trauma, pain to come out the other side. And it's a teacher a lot of the time. And you might not learn the lesson at the time and it might just hurt and it might just suck for 15 years. But there will be a point if you get the support you need to come through it, because a lot of people don't. And there's Movember at the moment and you're seeing this horrendous mass slash. We lose a man to suicide every minute at the moment. So 60 men an hour. who don't come through the other side, who those challenges surmount and they're not able to get through. If you are able to get through and see the woods through the trees and learn some from other people like yourself, then you can get to a pretty special place and you realize that you're quite tough. And it's that kintsugi piece, isn't it? So, the 16th century, the shogun of Japan had his favorite tea set, and his servant dropped the teapot. And that's a death sentence in 16th century Japan. You're about to get your head chopped off with a samurai sword. And he said, no, let me put it back together. And he put it back together with staples. And the shogun said, this is ugly. Come here. You're about to lose your head. No, give me one more chance. He's put it back together with gold glue and lacquer. So now where it was formerly broke, it's stronger now. So where we crack and chip and fray, and when we have this pain, now I'm bloody strong and I'm hella sparkly. And it's the same for us. If you're able to come through the other side of those things, you realize you're much more resilient than you gave yourself credit for. It's like training, like your calluses on your hands in the gym, they develop over time because you keep going through them, right? And they rub and they strengthen. It's the same for this. And you get to a point where you realize all those little things that have been chipping away at you made you bloody strong. I don't know if there's a way to get to that without some form of resistance. I think you have to go through the resistance to develop that. And when you do, you realize that these solutions and apps and webinars and everything that I do and offer doesn't actually help. And I tell people when I go and sit there as well, I'll come to talk to you today, but I'm probably not going to help. It might be nice for an hour and I hope it's a nice break. I don't like lunch and learns because I think it should be lunch or learn. If you don't have time for both, what the hell are we doing? So I think that's the solution landscape in which we exist. And well-meaning people like myself have been through some shit, and we want to use what we've learned in our life to help you with what's going on in yours. But your life is so different. What we should do instead is just create the space, the environment, and say, when you're good and ready, John, when you're going through, when you come through the other side, or when you need it, the support is here. These are the behaviors we want to see exemplified, and this is the measurement we're doing to see the efficacy of these things. But that is distinctly lacking at the moment.
I want to come back to space in a bit and what we might do with that space if we're afforded it in the workplace. In the meantime, a couple of bits to pick up on there. I know we've talked about quantifying well-being in the workplace. To what extent do you think we can do that, knowing that the human condition is one that is, well, I suppose very opaque even to us in some respects. We have a sense of our human nature, of course, but being able to quantify and pick apart the things that are ultimately leading to our sense of flourishing or not in life. How far can we go with that? What kind of areas are we to look at to get a sense of that?
Is it a business's responsibility to improve your happiness?
Great question.
Is it?
I would say I would hope not. That's something that I don't want to outsource to businesses.
So, but where we are at the moment is they are trying to do so. And that could be because of the complete disintegration of any balance between work and home now. I'm sitting in my kitchen. You're sitting at home. This is the mix now. 20, 30 years ago, you go to the office, you go to job, you come home, complete separation. It would not have been their responsibility at all. Where it bleeds over, we've really confused where the line is. And often with complete well intent, we are overstepping. And we're saying there are certain things that you need to do to improve your happiness, to be more well and to be more productive as a result. Open question. So different, depends on the business, the context, the industry, the in person, right? And so I actually think it's not an organization's responsibility to improve happiness, but it is their responsibility not to worsen it. And when we flip that switch, we focus on creating the environment where individuals can self-serve, because you can take the horse to Wellbeing Awards, but you cannot make it dream. You could have given me the world's best solution when I was at the point where I want to take my own life, right? You could have said, this has got the best engagement rate of any tool. I would have said, I don't give a shit. I can't even bear the thought of putting my own clothes on at this point. I thought, I don't want to be here. And there's different ranges. Right? I know what most people hopefully don't get to that point, but a lot of people are on the way up to it, and you're meeting them with this solution that's one size fits all. And I think it's amazing to continue to offer these things. What a world that we live in, that you've got Headspace, Calm, all these amazing apps, Jack included, the thing that we do. It's incredible. And when people are good and ready, they'll self-serve. And I think they need to provide those resources, but they should focus instead on just limiting the detriment of the current state of the workplace. Because if we're constantly going from meeting to meeting to meeting, we're cycling today, Microsoft put the ECG, the hats on, like the shower cap curtain hats to show the brain waves. And they showed the stress on the brain after back-to-back meetings is serious. And there's another thing called email apnea. 85% of us, when we're staring at screens, we don't breathe properly. We have these tiny little shallow breaths. We are literally starving ourselves of oxygen. Musculoskeletal issues are through the absolute roof. There are billions of people now with bad backs. Billions. If you look it up, the rate is absolutely insane. So that's the harm. So if we focus on just reducing that and creating a high sense of purpose in the work we do, he who has a why can do with any how, and then create space in between that purpose for you to do what you need, I think that's where we got to go. But that's not where we are, because the current state of play is a lot of people are struggling, and we want to help because we're good people. But are we doing more detriment when we're just putting on one more event? It's something else you don't have time for. Would you rather a bit of time to do what you need, or would you rather be told what you need by an expert who's sharing their story, someone like myself?
I wonder if when we provide space as well, that because of the world we've come to inhabit, we've touched on it even when we're plugged into work, but even when we take ourselves out of work, our attention can often be diffused because we're drenched in this dopamine chasing tech. And I wonder if, and I'm starting to see murmurs of it online, where you can see that there are groups of people who are trying to have much more control over how they have relationships with technology, and effectively there are some saying, "Oh, let's hope this is humans tapping into something, a deep need for wildness that they're trying to end the very online era." Is that something that you would welcome, the end of the very online era, so people could make the most of this space if they're afforded it by company?
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Dual-edged sword, double-edged sword. So like the Deloitte Gen Z Millennial Report, to plug my former employer, they do some good research, credit where credit is due, right? And they said that 4 out of 10, I think it's around 50% of Gen Z millennials feel inadequate because of social media. And yeah, no shit. Like, you don't have to spend long on Instagram to feel absolutely terrible. While like, I look like Frodo Baggins compared to some of the people on there. But then on the same side, about the same amount of people find their tribe, their sense of connection. We kept in contact with our friends and family and loved ones through the pandemic as a result of this technology. So it depends how you wield it. The average attention span is now about 8 seconds. The number one resource for mental health advice is now TikTok, with 86% of what on there, scientific study recently is rubbish, is wrong. With 14%, I think it is being actively damaging. So that's where people are going to get their information. So I think that's the state of play. It doesn't bode well for the future and future generations if they're getting advice from the Liver King. Right? It's nonsense. It's straight up nonsense. It's so nonsense. It is laughable, but it's the state of play. And that's why we're seeing year on year signs of anxiety and stress that continue to increase. And the rate of antidepressant use since 2010 has increased by 70%. It's crazy. And Andrew Huberman is one of my favorite podcasters and people in this space. He said it's actually quite simple. He doesn't say these words. I picked it from a meme. But I said, you basically a house plant, just with more complicated emotions. You just need some more sunlight and water. He says this for a few other things. So non-sleep, deep rest, decent nutrition, a bit of salt in the morning, some sunlight, regardless of whether it's through the clouds. And you focus on these basic tenets of what it is to be a human. Most of us are just not sleeping enough, but we've overcomplicated it. So actually we need to create space in the digital environment, which can be incredibly enriching because we're talking through the laptop now, right? And we wouldn't be able to do this otherwise. But you need to make space everything away from it because you are not going to get nourishment from a screen. Not until we get plugged into the neural link and we get fed through our mulch tubes in the back of our necks, but we're not there yet. And this week I've actually taken a step to that. I've had a wearable since 2017, early Fitbit steps. I started saying 10,000 steps every day, and I used to obsess. I would be sick and I'd go and do it. I'd walk in circles around my front room. I would go and see family, so I had to leave now, so I got to go and do my steps. Or I would walk to be late somewhere because I had to do my steps. Unhealthy. I go to the gym, I do my thing, and then you go beyond that, and it starts to like detriment from other areas of your life. I've actually got rid of it. I'm wearableness. I don't know how many steps I've done.
Yeah.
I don't know how many steps I've done. I don't know my resting heart rate. I recently upgraded from Apple to Whoop. I tried a free trial and said it's amazing. I did it for a week. And I think it's the new data sets with everything I got going on. I just thought, I don't need this. I was looking at the sleep data as soon as I woke up, and it took time to upload, and I was waiting there. I was like, wonder how my sleep was. I could tell you how it was because I yawned 47 times before 10 o'clock. And I want to just listen in to where I'm at and do that and do what feels right and just focus on the exercise. I'm not in the greatest shape I've ever been. I'm happy with that. I got a little bit in the way of love handles, but now I have a beer and I go to the gym. And I think that's much healthier for me. So I think from people who've got health conditions, people who want to lose weight and be serious about 100%, great tool. Use it. Use tech. Don't let tech use you. That's the position I got into. And I think it's unhealthy. And now I'm trying to configure the digital environment to create a space for what I need as an individual, which I've taken 32 years to work out what that is. And now I prioritize the shit out of it. They're my non-negotiables. If you don't like that, then that's fine. I'll do my work after doing that stuff. I create the space for what's important and I prioritize that every single day. I might have to flex the time, but it gets done every day.
Yeah. This point about not wearing wearables, this is, as someone who's a runner, I've been asked so many times if I've got Strava, if I wear a wearable, and similar to your sentiments, I prefer to just listen to my body. I know when I can run faster, when I should slow down. I know when I'm tired or I've not slept well enough. It's something that, because we get tracked with everything else and because we can end up obsessing over data, we have this huge data fetish, and often we don't even know what we're doing chasing that data, and we don't even know what to do with it. Data and information doesn't equal wisdom, and I'm certainly not saying that I'm wise, but I see nothing but bringing stress, competition, and probably more anxiety around it if I was just bombarded with data.
I think at first it was helpful to understand myself, to know what works, what doesn't work. But I think you can go past the point where it's helpful. Or you just evolve past it and you learn yourself, and then hopefully you're able to apply the feelings, how you're feeling in your body to what's going on with the day. We'll see how I go. I haven't disappeared yet into the ether as a result of not wearing it. For sure, I still feel like my human form and my earthly being is still around. So we'll tell in a week's time. Who knows?
Yes, well, that's important. That notion of understanding there's a world beyond your head. You've talked about it already, implying it in previous responses where you've talked about being aware of your body and getting into your body. And we can spend so long dealing with abstractions, manipulating information, following acronyms and trending topics that it's like we inhabit this whole other realm, and we forget that we're embodied creatures. And that point you were talking about with Huberman, the idea of going out and getting some sunlight in the morning. I mean, the fact that we even have to say that as some kind of advice now. One of the most, what's the right word to use? Transformative is probably the wrong word. It certainly felt like a rite of passage. A couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to start learning a bit of bushcraft and getting out into the wild a bit, because I realized that if this whole machine, as in our global economy, started sputtering and then we had to go and do stuff for ourselves, I realized I was blooming useless. Like, I had no idea.
I'm going to have to travel up north and come find you. Like, I'm in trouble. If I got to do anything beyond chop wood, I'm probably done for.
Yeah, well, I can't say I've nailed it by any stretch. But I went down to these woods in Wiltshire. It's some of the only ancient woodland left in England. It's on the Great Ridge Forest. And I was with an ex-army man called Joe O'Leary. He's got books on bushcraft, excellent guy. And it was just Joe and I basically my task was to learn how to build a shelter that I was going to stay in for the night. I had to learn how to start my own fire from the wood that was available in the woods. I had to learn how to create, or fashion, should I say, cooking apparatus so I could put trout on the fire. I also wanted to know how to handle animals, basically. So I wanted to learn how to pluck and fillet a pheasant and gut a fish and all those things.
Eat it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That was another thing. I thought, well, like, I do eat this stuff. I should know how to do stuff with it. And it was only 48 hours that I spent in those woods, but I didn't go beyond those woods in that time. And I had a pretty sketchy night's sleep because ultimately I was just surrounded by a living woodland and I was next to my fire and I could hear the bugs crawling around. But those 2 days of being out in the woods were the most human I think I've ever felt. And even spending time learning how to discern the environment, that's an ash tree, that's an elm tree. These things down here are poisonous. Those mushrooms you can eat. That's where you get hazelnuts from. I realized that I would go on walks before and everything were just trees. They're just trees. They're nondescript trees. Isn't this just lovely scenery? But then I realized that I was actually tapping into something that a few generations ago would have been so normal. And I suppose if there's one way that I would like to make more use of the space that I afford myself or I'm afforded by work, it's how is it that I get to be more human, turn this stuff off, go and be in the body, go and engage with the world and see the complexity of it all, the kind of wonder of creation.
So on the most alive I've felt in the past 3 years, the most emotional I feel, the most tapped into like who I am is when I do these like big physical challenges. So I did the Camino de Santiago. I did it in 19 days. So I did about 56 kilometers a day.
That's insane. By the way, I did that earlier on in the year, but I only managed 2/3 before an old tendon injury reared up. And I did not do those 2/3 in 19 days. So seriously, hats off to you.
You don't need to go as stupid as I do. There's something I need to work out in myself that I need to go to extreme lengths to fully get into who I am. And I know that it's a bit of like self-flagellation and I know that, but equally, I really do quite enjoy it. And you get to the point when you're on those walks and you're looking around and I couldn't distinguish a birch from a willow. I've got to tell you, I'm just tree at this moment. But regardless of that, you just roll back the layers and everything is so simple. There's no meetings, no tax bills, no worrying about calls, no business politics. And you think you really don't need much and you feel so alive. And I don't know how many times I cried. I'm more of a crier than I have been before, right? Because I'm tapped into this and I try and embrace that now instead of being this big macho man who doesn't show emotions. That's bullshit in my opinion. We just bottle it and just get angry in other ways once you've had a beer. That's what most people do. So I would choose to try and let them go. And yeah, multiple times I've gone to realization, I'm not as terrible as I think. I don't need to treat myself this way. And next year I'm going to hopefully, it's my intention. We'll see if I do it. Now, right now, I want to do a marathon carpool and set a world record. So I want to put a marathon distance, the quickest time in human history next November for Movember and hopefully raise a lot of money in the process. Part of me is thinking, hell yeah, what a challenge. The other half is thinking, why do you need to punish yourself? You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. And I'm walking that tightrope at the moment. Everyone I tell thinks it's the most ludicrous, stupid idea. But the little voice inside will says, go on. They don't, David Goggins again. They don't know me, son. You don't know me, son. He's like, who's going to get the boats? And I'm like, I think he's an absolute lunatic. And I think he hurts himself beyond what's healthy. But equally, you have to respect the work and doing something incredible that people have never done. And to do so, you have to dig deeper than most people can. But we've all got it in us. Even if you don't, you've got a lot more in you than you've ever thought. And you just have to go so places and you'll get to deeper than you've ever been in and you'll be able to go again. And you think, how do I do that? And then you come out the other side and you think, yeah, I'm doing all right. And then but when you unlock that bonus level on Donkey Kong, there's no putting that away. So I think maybe that's why I'm like, I could do these amazing things. I want to change the world. I want to do these incredible challenges because I can, and because I'm still here, because I could have so easily been one of the 60 men every hour, but I am here. And while I'm here, I want to do incredible things, but then I'm trying to walk the tightrope with self-compassion at the same time, which I don't find quite as easy. But I'm working out every day. I reflect and listen and talk and try and learn. I can be fairly stubborn, but it is what it is.
I'm sure I wouldn't be the only one saying it. I'm sure readers of your book that comes out in January, and I'd like you to tell us more about that a little bit later, will also join me in saying this, but I'm very glad that you've managed to shake off, what Freud would call a death instinct, and have turned it into, waking up every day and thanking the lucky stars that you're here and loving life and giving it everything. And you're totally right that when you have an inclination, when you started to say there's something in your mind that you think you need to do, and once you've articulated it, even if you haven't told people yet, you feel like there's no going back now. It has to be done.
It grows and grows and grows.
Keeps itching at you.
Oh, literally. Yeah, he's just there. You can't see him, but he's just there. He's chatting to me. Go on. You don't know me, son.
Yeah. Well, I have to thank you actually, for giving me I suppose the gumption to start scratching an itch that I'd had. I've generally been quite good at, in the kind of last 8-9 years of following through with things that feel like they're going to be good for me, that I'm doing them for their own sake. The last few years felt like I had an itch to scratch with regards to some kind of intellectual, but engaging journey with stuff that's going on out in the world. And there are all sorts of false starts that I've had, and sometimes it's because of my mind jumping around. I want to be able to write about things and research things, but then by the time I've gotten halfway through that essay, it's, oh God, look at this thing over here, I want to do that. But for a long time, I'd been toying with the idea of a podcast, and actually having watched you carve out a path and effectively just unabashedly move on or push on with the things that you find are moving you from within, and to allow an outlet to find its way in the world has certainly pushed me on. So definitely thanks for that. I mean, you are a huge inspiration. I'm sure I'm not the only one that you've inspired to make the move.
I think you've been incredibly selfish keeping your gift from the world for so long, and I'm happy to see that you're going to share this with people. And I know that people will find this interesting and enjoy listening to you, because I always have.
Well, that is very, very kind of you. I know we're coming to the end zone, but I wanted to read out a Substack post to you, or a passage from a Substack post to you, because I've been wondering lately whether poor well-being work is not a bug, but perhaps a feature of modern work. And so the Substack post is by a writer called Paul Kingsnorth. I would perhaps better describe him as a modern day monk. He's written extensively about how the root of the polycrisis that everyone is talking about, people call it polycrisis, method crises. He thinks the root of it is a spiritual crisis. He thinks that our drive toward creating a machine world has dehumanized us. The driving economic force of prosperity and trying to remove obstacles to maximize our freedom to get the things that we want above all else is what's causing this deep unease and a lot of us going searching for things to grab onto. So I'll quote the passage to get your reaction. And this comes from the final installment from a Substack essay series called Divining the Machine. And he begins by quoting a philosopher called E.F. Schumacher. I suggest that the foundations of peace cannot be laid by universal prosperity in the modern sense, because such prosperity, if attainable at all, is attainable only by cultivating such drives of human nature as greed and envy, which destroy intelligence, happiness, serenity, and thereby the peacefulness of man. What is at stake is not economic, but culture. not the standard of living, but the quality of life. Economics and the standard of living can just as well be looked after by a capitalist system, moderated by a bit of planning and redistributive taxation. But culture, and generally the quality of life, can now only be debased by such a system. Kingsnorth then continues, Schumacher distinguishes themselves from today's economists, for whom talk like this is embarrassingly passé. We're all grown-ups now, and we know that living by one is not only necessary, can be justified with software modelling and leader columns in the Times. But a value system which glorifies wealth and accumulation, that builds itself on a platform of one, which inflames and creates more of it daily through a marketing machine which colonizes the human mind. This is what every spiritual tradition in history has warned against, and with good reason. Take, for example, the famous list of the 7 deadly sins in the Western Christian tradition: gluttony, lust, pride, wrath, greed, sloth, and envy. With the possible exception of sloth, we currently live in a culture which not only sees nothing wrong with these values, but actively encourages them. The pursuit of these 6 vices is no longer something to be confessed or repented. It is the very thing which drives our notion of progress, big P progress, forward. So this is who we are. You don't have to be a Christian or a Buddhist to see where it has led us and where it will lead us next. Want is the acid, capitalism is the battery, growth is the engine, greed is the forming energy that moves us to where we are inevitably headed. What is the brake? The answer is as hard as it is old-fashioned. I've come to see that all of the questions raised in these essays, the questions raised in my lifetime of non-fiction writing, and maybe my fiction too, can be said to come back to one word: limits. Modernity is a machine for destroying limits. The ideology of the machine, the liberation of individual desire, sees our world as a blank slate to be written on afresh when the old limits of nature and culture are washed away. This is our faith, that breaking boundaries leads to happiness, that boundaries are barriers rather than opportunities. We strain against all limits. It's who we are.
There's so much I want to say, and I'm going to do it quick. 3 things. We measure productivity on grinding out widgets and financial performance, but long-term productivity for organizations is predicated on creativity, fun, and connection. And we neglect leaving space for that at the peril of future growth. I think it's difficult to quantify. And I think that's something we have to create space for. We're doing it awfully at the moment. So I completely agree on that point. You're seeing this play out with Gen AI. And they said when that was going to come out, it was only going to automate the manual repetitive jobs. But why have we seen strikes with the Hollywood writers, if that's the case? It's the opposite. It's replacing the creativity. The truck drivers are not losing their job anytime soon. We've been promised also driving car for a very long time, but it's actually the screenwriters that are. And that is very interesting. It's going to be a dichotomy of organizations, those that prioritize human performance and those that automation, actually. Automation isn't a word. And we're going to see those 2 camps, and hopefully I want this camp to win out, but there's going to be a lot of that. And then lastly, boundaries. I love boundaries. I think work-life balance is rubbish. If you leave it up to chance, work wins every time. If two dogs are in a fight, work and life, work is much bigger and it's an extra large pit bull, right? And it's going to kill the other one, and it wins every time. So you put in place the boundaries, you define what that is, and then you can find a sense of balance afterwards. And if there's balance, it's life work. Actually, screw that. It's just life. Work is one part of it, not the first part. So I totally agree on all that. It was beautiful.
Well, I'll put it in the show notes. I'll share it with you. Ryan, you're an absolute diamond. I knew I'd love this conversation. I absolutely loved it. I love your drive, your ambition, your mission, whatever it is that you want to call it. I know that you're trying to bring good to the world, and we definitely need more of that. So tell people where they can find you, what's coming from you next, and I'll make sure to include it in the episode note.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks again. I'm looking forward to the second round. Hopefully once you got your 50 episodes in, we'll be like, we'll go back to the beginning and
absolutely
bring Ryan on. We'll see what
oh, you know it.
And I'll still be running around, Wellbeing this, data that. Am I right? But no, yeah, it's Ryan Hopkins on LinkedIn. You should be able to find me. Future of Wellbeing on Instagram and TikTok. And my book, 52 Weeks of Wellbeing, a no nonsense guide, is coming out in January. Not one piece of advice or solution is offered, rather giving you the opportunity to consider the element we're discussing and work out what it means to you. So you can define your boundaries and then hopefully create your balance afterwards. That's the intention anyway, because yeah, if I was to start giving out advice, I'd be completely contradicting everything I've just said, right? And I appreciate you for letting me come on and ramble for a little bit. hopefully it was understandable and helpful to some people.
Definitely understandable. 50 episodes in, I can only hope that I've got a way with words that you do. So keep doing what you're doing. Love it. Looking forward to reading the book when it comes out. And classmates, maybe I've just coined a term for anyone who might be listening to this. Classmates, thanks for joining us. You'll catch Ryan in episode 50.
Thank you.
See you later, brother. Thank you for joining me in Thinking Class today. To keep up to date with all that I am doing, please subscribe to the Thinking Class YouTube channel @Thinking Class and follow me on X @Thinking Classes. Thinking Class seeks to understand the civilizational issues we face and why what our leaders do in response matters. Here, I seek to explore the ideas, values, and culture that made our civilization, those that are unmaking it, and how leaders at our public and private institutions should respond. Engage with me on YouTube or X, or write to me at thinkingclasspod@gmail.com to tell me who you want me to speak to and what topics are important to you. I look forward to seeing you there and for joining me on this journey.